I was inspired to do this video by a comment left by a viewer who watched my shopping in Tokyo video. Anyway, it got me thinking about compilation albums, good or bad. So what I want to do in this video is present both sides of the argument as I see it. I'm going to make a few plus points for compilations and a few minus points against compilation albums. And at the end, try to make some sort of sense of it all. And I'd definitely like to hear what you think about compilation albums. So let's start with the positives. The first one that springs to my mind is that compilation albums are a good way to bring together singles. Now, as many fans know, in the early days, Elvis's singles were not released on albums. So in 1958, someone had the bright idea of bringing together all Elvis's hit singles up to that point, and the Golden Records series was born. And there were 4 of these albums released during Elvis's lifetime and 1 more after he died. So this is certainly a great way to bring all those songs together in one place. Another good thing about compilation albums is they're a great way to introduce new fans to his music. I've no doubt that many people watching this video heard their first Elvis music via a compilation LP. And certainly in my case, one of the very first Elvis records I was aware of was the 40 Greatest Hits. And this is a later pressing on pink vinyl. There was an earlier version on the Arcade label, and that was the one that I heard many times as a boy. But this was the first one that I bought on pink vinyl. And just looking at the pink record with the blue labels takes me back over 40 years every time I see them. A really good compilation spanning an artist's entire career can really put that recorded work into perspective. And an excellent example of that is this compilation here, Artist of the Century. Now, I know this was also released on vinyl, but I've only got it on CD. I think if you're going to come up with a title like Artist of the Century, then you need to look beyond Elvis's singles. And that's exactly what this 3 CD set does. It starts out with some classic Sun Records songs, and then it goes into the 50s with Heartbreak Hotel, lots of other hits in there. And it goes right through to 1976 for The Heart, one of Elvis's last hits. And in between the singles, there are lots of really good songs that only appeared on albums. And any compilation that has I'll Hold You in My Heart on it is definitely worth it for me. It shows that the people who made this set really know Elvis's music. And in fact, it's credited to Ernst Michael Jorgensen and Roger Seaman. And those guys have been behind some amazing compilations over the past 20 odd years. Another good type of compilation is the ones which gather rarities in one place. And one example is this one here from the UK called Elvis in Demand. And this was compiled in 1977 based on a poll of members of the UK fan club. And this album comprises songs that they wanted to see on an LP. And most of the songs were unavailable at that time. And some, in fact, had never been released in the UK. So, of course, since CDs came along, albums like this are not really essential anymore, but they're still nice to have. Another one that was released in 1977 in Japan was this one here. It's called Singles, and it does what you'd expect. It just brings together a few songs that had only been released on singles, not especially big hit singles, but singles anyway. And this is very similar to the Lost Singles album, which appeared on the Elvis Aaron Presley box set. This one was actually released just before Elvis died. And another example from around that period was the German Rare Elvis series. This is the first one. Again, most of these tracks can be found, if not all of the tracks can be found on CD, but at the time these were great albums. Another creative use of compilations is the albums that never were type of release. So for instance, this release here from the 1980s, which came out of Germany, For the Asking. And this brings together all the songs that Elvis recorded, or most of the songs that Elvis recorded in the studio in 1963 and 64. This could well have been an album back in the day, but they chose not to release it. And here it is now, and you get all the songs in their original context. Another example is this Tickle Me album. The movie, of course, had enough songs for an album, but they never released one. And perhaps the most famous example of all is the Elvis Sun collection. RCA could easily have released this as his very first LP back in 1956. They obviously chose not to, but they could have done so. Or they could have had, for example, Heartbreak Hotel, the first song on side 1, followed by the 5 Sun A-sides. And I Was the One on side 2, followed by the 5 Sun B-sides. But it wasn't to be. Still, this is a great compilation. Another excellent type of compilation album is the one which tells you something or reveals something about Elvis as a recording artist. And there's no better example of that than this album here, Stereo 57, Essential Elvis Volume 2. So the binaural mixes of the songs on this album are completely different to anything we heard before. And you can really hear Elvis' singing crystal clear on this album. Also, these two albums here, Our Memories of Elvis Volume 1 and 2, these are also excellent in my opinion. The idea behind these albums was to try and show Elvis's work without the backing vocalists. You can still hear the backing vocalists slightly in the background because the sound of their voices obviously bled into Elvis's microphone. And I prefer the versions on these albums to the ones that wound up on the albums. Although I don't particularly dislike the ones with the backing vocalists. The way I see it is Elvis wanted those guys on there. He chose to have them not only in the studio but also on stage with him. So I think he definitely wanted them on the songs and he probably liked the results. But for me personally, it's good to have them both, but these versions sound better to my ears. There have been a lot of improvements in mastering technology over the past couple of decades, and often it's the compilation albums that are the beneficiaries of those technological improvements. So for example, this album here, Elvis 24 Karat Hits, superb compilation here, mastered by Steve Hoffman. This is the original 2LP version. You can also get a 3LP version now. And here's another example. This is Elvis's Golden Records Volume 3. This is on the ORG, Original Recordings Group label. And this is a double album, 45 RPM. Absolutely superb sounding album. And another great type of compilation album that we've been lucky to have over the past few years is the so-called companion album, which have been put out by FTD. For instance, this one here, Kissing Cousins, a double album of master takes and alternate takes. All right, so let's look at some negative points about compilation albums. And the first one that springs to mind is that many compilation albums are not very well thought out. So, for instance, the Toilet Roll LP. And it's called the Toilet Roll LP, not because I want to throw it down the loo, but because it actually has an advertisement for a toilet roll on the back. And if you look at the songs on here, it just seems to be a rather random collection of 50s and 60s songs. And it just goes from one decade to the next with no real thought or concept behind it. And a similar album is the Pure Gold album from 1975. This is a Japanese version with this unusual corner obi here, and it actually has a nice back cover different to other countries. But the contents are the same as everywhere else, and it's just a bit random for my liking. You start out with Kentucky Rain, and then you go back to Fever, and then you get a live track, and then you're into the 50s. Just a couple of the songs are in stereo, most of them are in reprocessed stereo. It's all over the place. And then on side 2, you've actually got I Got a Woman, and this is an album called Pure Gold. So you would expect them to at least put 10 big hits on there. And I Got a Woman, much as I love it, it was not a hit for Elvis. So not a great compilation in my opinion. Another thing I don't like about some compilations is that they take advantage of fans' desire to get as many different versions of songs as possible. And an example of that came out in 1977, the Welcome to My World album. And this is just released really to cash in on Elvis's popularity in the country market at that time. It's just a collection of country songs, mainly from the 1970s. And in fact, the liner notes in this Japanese pressing, they refer to this album as Elvis Country Volume 2. So for the fan who wants everything, the only thing of any interest on this album is an unreleased live version of I Can't Stop Loving You. There's a bit of a cash-in job, but many people bought this. It's a very easy album to find. And it wasn't long before they were at it again with this gospel album here, He Walks Beside Me. Any fan walking into a record shop in 1978 and picking this up would have seen very little that they didn't already have, just a couple of unreleased alternate takes. So RCA is trying to appeal to everyone at the same time. They want the casual fan, the casual buyer to purchase this compilation album, but they also want the fans to grab it as well for a couple of unreleased takes. And another type of compilation that we often saw while Elvis was alive, and again since he died, is what you might call the Shameless cash-in job. And perhaps the classic example of that is the Burning Love album from 1972. A hit single, huge hit single, both sides of that record on an LP with 8 movie songs that had nothing to do with Elvis in the 1970s. I suppose the only case you could make for this album is that the movie songs on this album were deleted at the time. But this is a classic example of a cash-in job. And another one that I would bracket alongside that one is this Pickwick copy of Frankie and Johnny. The 12-track version of Frankie and Johnny was deleted at the time, so what they did was they released this 9-track version on Pickwick. And the graphics are pretty cheesy here with these little hearts. You've got a 1970s front cover picture of Elvis with 9 tracks from the mid-60s, and on the back you've got these pictures from Aloha, and that's the way it is. And this information down here, it's clearly been pasted on. You can see an outline of where it's been pasted on. It just looks very cheap, and they've even removed some of the tracks from the original soundtrack album, presumably because they didn't want to pay any more royalties than they had to on what was a budget album after all. But still, pretty nasty cash-in job. And another unfortunate thing you see with compilation albums is the bizarre concept compilation albums. The classic example, the worst example of all time, was an album I simply refused to buy, and that's Elvis Sings Hits for Children and Grown-Ups too. But there was another one from around about that time, and that is a Canadian tribute. This is really not a very good compilation in my opinion. As it states on the back, it combines Elvis's biggest hits of 1957 when he toured Canada with other songs written by Canadian songwriters. So basically you go from Jailhouse Rock, Teddy Bear and Loving You, from those 3 hits in 1957 to a load of songs from the 1970s, plus I'm Moving On and a press conference. It really doesn't work as far as I'm concerned. So those are some ideas I have about compilation albums. I think you also have to keep in mind that compilation albums over the years have way outsold any other kind of Elvis albums, even his live albums and his religious albums. It's the compilation albums that do the best business. And some of them, of course, are an integral part of Elvis's discography, the Golden Records series, for example. But what do you think about Elvis's compilation albums? Let me know in the comment section below. Thanks a lot. Cheers.